So, all right, Kenya's constitution, promulgated in 2010, heralded the end of powerful provincial administration that had existed for more than 50 years, dating back to the colonial rule. And another visible shift was transition from 175 local authorities to 48 county governments. And as Jacob John Kiore now looks at the shift in Kenya's government 60 years on, let's take a look at what Jacob has prepared for us.
The powerful provincial administration in Kenya has a historical background dating back to the colonial era. Initially established by the British colonial government to facilitate administrative control and governance, the provincial administration continued to be powerful and influential even after Kenya gained her independence. Before independence, Kenya was divided into 8 provinces, each led by a British administrator. The aim of the provincial administration was to maintain law and order, collect taxes, and implement government policies at the local level.
They had borrowed it from the French, the prefectorial system, where you got the central government, but the executive arm of government in the regions, those are the officers they called the provincial administration, and it is so global that India, Japan, you go to Denmark, you go to Sweden, you'll get that. Canada, South Africa, you'll get that. So they are the ones who used it to represent the authority to the natives in the reserves, the officers, the chiefs, and those admin officers. They used to collect taxes. They used to keep law and order, to enforce laws. They were the ones in to the extent of Central, they were using the recruitment of labor. Wanafinya watu sana, sasa waende wakafanya kazi kwa wazungu.
After Kenya gained independence in 1963, the provincial administration continued to play a crucial role in governance.
You get things they call the Lancaster House negotiations. Those Lancaster House negotiations, they made sure that they had made laws, a lot of influence by the colonial administration. They made laws so the transition is not bumpy, is not revolutionary, is not bloody. So the provincial administration adapted, got that status. The provincial commissioners, the district commissioners, the transition, and we have a lot we called the promotees. So that you would be a DO for 1 year and you are promoted to a DC because it's Kenyanization, Africanization. Then the ones who are DCs during the colonial, almost the transition period, they were the ones who came to be PCs. Others were sons of chiefs. But because they had hit, say, from 4, they would be taken to Jean School, Kenya Institute of Administration, or they would be taken to a crash program in Birmingham. They are trained and they come to take over those roles.
The provincial administrators were called provincial commissioners and were appointed by the president. PCs were responsible for coordinating development activities and maintaining security in their respective provinces, wielding centralized powers over local affairs.
During our inductions, a lot of training, the training shifted from representatives of the government to people who serve the citizen. They had been given a mandate in law and mandate of executive authority by a circular called Presidential Circular Number 1 of 1965. You are representing the president. Now, in that particular format, the DO or the DC is the chairman of the District Development Committee. Who are the members? The elected leaders, the appointed leaders, and the ordained leaders. For instance, you'd call a site as minor or or Moisaka, Fremon Moisaka. He became 2 years later. You ask him. He used to chair a meeting where the President Moi, he is there representing Wananchi wa Baringo.
Which led to criticism that the system was overreaching and abusing power.
And we used to advise chiefs in particular. 6 months before the election, go slow with my friend, your friend. Go slow. If you do not go slow, you will be election issue. Because we'll be connected by the Attorney General's chambers. We had a supervisors of elections based there, but the deputies or provincial commissioners and the returning officers were district commissioners. Very well conducted until I think the second most rigged election, 1988, utaambiwa, 1988, the second most rigged, which is the first most rigged, 57, 58, where mtu kama ya bamu yavaa vizuri unapewa kura 5. Na kama wewe ni mtoto wa mama unanyimwa. Most rigged, open. Lakini ile ingine ni ile mlolongo, you remember?
Yes.
Hapo, the government lost, we hit the crisis of confidence as a country. We hit another one last year, I saw another one. Crisis of confidence.
In 2010, Kenya adopted a new constitution that introduced devolution, which translated to channeling power and resources to the county level. As a result, the provincial administration was replaced by county governments. Owing to the existence of a system for years, there were renewed calls for redefining the roles of a provincial administration, leading to the change of their name and are now referred to as the National Government Administration Officers.
And one of the big differences that I'm seeing now here is that we made our president to be very vulnerable. Kanyangalika yote waweza tukana rais.
Though they do not yield massive powers as they used to and are now appointees of the Interior Ministry, regional commissioners and county commissioners chair security committees in their respective jurisdictions and are the link between county governments and national government, particularly on functions that have remained with the national government and other residue functions. But devolution did not only mark the end of a powerful provincial administration, it also marked the end of a local government setup, which consisted of 175 local authorities, otherwise known as councils. The authorities were classified as city council, municipal council, town council, and county council.
In that category of those 4, Nairobi had its own jurisdiction, and an act an act through Parliament that gave Nairobi a wider scope than the municipalities. Then us as municipal councils, and most of them were then, the big ones were the provincial headquarters. Except Thika wasn't a provincial headquarter. We had Nyeri, and of course now we had other municipalities that were big around the provincial headquarters. And I am a beneficiary, for example, of when county councils were working.
The city and municipal councils were led by a mayor as the political figurehead, the town clerk as the administrator, and councillors as legislators. The county councils, on the other hand, were headed by county chairmen, with county clerk being the lead administrator. They were responsible for the administration and development of urban centres, as well as planning, housing, traffic management, and other aspects of urban governance, with Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa being among the first to have municipal councils.
The services that they were giving to Wananchi, they were doing the roads comfortably. The health services, health centers were in the hands of local authorities. Education, roads, bursaries, and many other things. The service provider, those of us that are of my age, were vaccinated in those health centers. We never used to go. There were no what we call, people relied on private hospitals, missionary hospitals. It wasn't necessary because the services were being delivered efficiently by the local authorities of that time. So they were performing. I'm a beneficiary of that time.
Over time, the councils became autonomous in their decision making, with residents having the opportunity to elect their representatives.
Local Government Act Cap 265 was amended, and the allocations of the funds that were coming from the consolidated fund to the local governments was taken back, removed and taken back to the consolidated fund by central government. And then local authorities now had a trickle down of about 1.5% from 40. After that, those of us that belong to that time can realize that services went down.
The councils were, however, criticized for their centralized nature and limited citizen participation, necessitating the shift to county governments.
The local government were not centralized. It is the conditions in Cap 265 that made the Minister for Local Government take up all the services. To do anything, if you are the mayor, you have to seek approval. If the minister thinks that you're not towing the line, you don't get approval. So that concentration of approvals, of you don't know what you are doing, that was the problem.
John Jacob Curia, Channel 1.
All right, welcome back. Thank you, Jacob Curia, for that. Taking a look at where we've come from and some of the strides that we've made as a nation. All right, right about now, it's time for us to get into the discussion. It's Eye on Politics, but with a special focus on Kenya at 60. What are some of the gains, hits and misses that we as a country have so far achieved? And what are some of the achievements that we need to work on or make better for that matter? I'm joined in studio by Eric Muturi, he's a youth leader. He's also an expert, governance analyst as well. He's an aspiring politician as well. Eric, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yes.
It's always a pleasure to be here and interact with the viewers.
Karibu sana.
And especially Kenya at 60. You know, 60 years ago, I think I was either under discussion or the ones that were supposed to be discussing me were also under discussion.
I like the way you twisted it. Those who are discussing you probably also being discussed. All right.
Somewhere else.
Watu wa Kiambu, I hope you are familiar with this face.
Actually, I won't tell them good morning.
Yeah.
You know, in Kiambu, they call me Muturi Wanduthi. It is
we all know what Nduthi is all about.
Yes, it's only when I come to KBC where, because I need to speak the Queen's English, I become Eric Muturi.
You know, when you want to talk about Queen's English, Oscar and I don't know what language you'll be talking about. If you want to talk in Queen's language, but it's okay. Ken Bosire, who is a senior journalist, is many years of experience under the sleeve. He's an editor with so many years of experience. We want to talk about some of the gains we have made as a nation. Ken Bosire, good morning.
Thank you for having me.
He's talked about Queen's language. So what are we going to talk about? You and I, probably. You better teach us. That's Queen's language. Karibu.
Yes, Asante sana.
Right.
Thank you.
Oscar Omondi, who is a lecturer at Kenya Methodist University, is also a researcher, political science researcher. So this is where the Queen's language now come in. Oscar Omondi.
Yeah, good morning, Kenyans, and good morning, Victor.
Karibu.
I thank you for inviting us here, and it's good to celebrate Kenya at 60. Yeah.
All right. Your background says Kenya at 60. That is what you'll be talking about right now. But right about now, let me take you through the traffic before you leave your house. This is how we do it here every morning. The traffic. The Standard newspaper, on the front page of It's Broke, experts say it's all about wastage and luxury. That newspaper, Treasury claims it's broke, experts say it's all about luxury, while government says that it does not have money to pay salaries, or that it's spending on luxury trips and hospitality 30%, with analysts saying that money is being diverted to things that can be. With you, Ken Bosiri. He claims it's broke. Experts say it's all about wastage and luxury. What do you make?
I think there is a sense that they are right. That we seem as a country in what we call a financial crunch.
Yes.
But yet, leadership, we do not see that kind of feeling reflected. For instance, I get very disturbed that we, as usual, we live large as a government. That is a big disconnect from what the public. They're right in the sense that we've not seen those austerity level, at the government level, right from the national county executives. You still see people living beyond their own country. They don't seem to be part of what we are as an citizenry.
Okay, Oscar.
Yeah. I think we are in a state of crisis. What I call, yeah, if you manage by crisis, where you don't have any strategy, you don't have any plan, just waiting for a crisis to come. Crisis. And most of the time fail, because if you're managing by crisis, then you need to see the signals, experts, for example, and when you see the warnings and you might call them, and then you see how you the system. But when you do crisis management, like whatever we have, you always, for example, El Nino, that there are a warning, and then there was a narrative, and then again we are caught aware. So El Nino was not supposed to be. Yeah, there was, and we've dealt with El Nino before. And
it was not an emergency.
It was not. People will be displaced. We knew these floods will sweep roads. We knew there will be problems to deal. There's no emergency. Put in place resilience and contingencies to deal with them. Again, we are broke, and now ourselves broke, or we saw it come. It's not it shouldn't be like a crisis. It's not be sudden thing. Economy has been going down and down and down, and we've not put in place good to manage that particular crisis.
Muturi, Treasury claims it's wastage and luxury.
Victor,
we have lots of people heading. Yes.
I always say, if just were to be put into a song, for the simple reason that I've always heard of austerity measures. The former finance minister, Uhuru, announcing when he was reading the budget. You remember that time was the time we bought a lot of ostensibly to save on fuel. Kind of like every subsequent government, austerity, but how to tame the financial spending, we have not really anymore. And I'll not be surprised. Part of the bipartisan talks was that now be traveling, economy, and we should try to cut down as much expenditure as possible. 28 showed us that it was what some people air that's hot. So austerity measures are good when it comes to writing.
But the implementation?
But implementation is a far cry.
They say
different.
Yes. All right, let's take a break and then we dive straight into the discussion. Kenya at 6.
For the years, we have been putting you on the front seat. Country's history, covering Kenya's needs. As we commemorate 60 years, we give you yet another chance to be history. This year's Jamhuri Day celebration by His Excellency President Dr. William Ruto at Uhuru Garden. Coverage of the celebrations on Tuesday, 12/3 on KBC Channel 1.
Tumeende tulikuwa tumesaliana hapa.
Na huyu endwa ndizi vitu yote ametoa wapi?
Jumbe unasema hivi.
And the food run. Huh? Na
inafuta wewe kasi. And you are one Louise of Mama Kayai. Twende.
Mama Kayai yako kwa ofisi mpe.
Hujawahi niona nikiwa smart basi. Hii ni kujia sherehe kesho.
Na tena tunaimba ile wimbo. Hivi.
Oya. Akona the mark of quality.
Nataka kumaliza mambo yetu.
Umenimaliza kikombe. September, October.
Ni kama tu nikuje nikuambie sasa makosa
au sio? Ndio manake
every month p.m. to 9 p.m. on KBC.
All right, welcome back. But first of all, front page of the first, it was the Standard. Treasury claims it's broke export and luxury. What do we have on the front page of the Star newspaper? Trips 360 million so far. Opposition accuses president of is in economic mess, but the president says jobs for unemployed youth. 360 million shillings spent so far. Ken Busire?
I would not even have said that he defends it. You can't defend it. He has granted that he has to travel, but one other thing be the person traveling. He has a cabinet. He can delegate in an era where we are talking about to be an in-person travel to go to the lobby for these jobs. I think It should, in my view, very humble view, to take time, sit back and concentrate here and delegate. He has dockets that deal with those foreign things. Foreign Minister for Foreign Affairs, please go, and this is what we have missions around the world. We have missions that can deal with these things. Because a presidential trip is very expensive. It has many logistics. 1 year down the line, let's sit back. He needs to have a conversation with himself. This far, what have I brought home? And compared to what we are losing, you know, there's always an audit. He really needs to delegate more. Manage at the back room, because he has people who are paid by the tax. We have a foreign minister, we have a minister for every with those things. He does not need to go. These days, work remotely. You can still schedule online and discuss what you want to discuss. Really, for me, they are luxury trips. They may be what comparable, and he has to deal with the defending perception. You are always out. Big home. These things at home. I think that for me, he can't trips that one too many. He needs his ministers work, and if he doesn't have any officials, then he should fire them like yesterday. Yes.
All right. Trips, 360 million shillings spent so far.
Yeah, I think, Victor, that when you work as an opposition leader or representative, whatever work you do, I will ask you, what is your want to do when you achieve this, for example?
What is the
that, Victor, if you become president, what will you want to do? One thing somebody can ask, I may want to travel the world. I look at President William Ruto going on 48 trips. He's now trying to achieve his individual, what he would like to do, like a hobby. If you look at which, he goes to Djibouti, for example. He goes to Seychelles. You know, there's nothing he can provide to Kenya. He goes to Togo, a country that doesn't even have constant 24-hour electricity. It's some, I'm sorry to say that, but some of these trips to
But to be fair to Togo, we also grapple with our own I mean, it's one too
the
many.
last time that what can you say about that is power, the Nassim? Are you really talking about the cost of power, or do we have power? For example, before we even talk about we should also discuss, do we have electricity? This is the third time we are experiencing a national power blackout. I thought this administration had play, but now I'm convinced that it's particularly.
Oscar, let's leave it at that. Ruto defends 48 trips? Very quickly.
Yeah, I think to the trips, and we must have an understanding is the #1 ambassador of the country. President visits a number of jurisdictions, and always when I read the papers, they report that we have trips. I think this government is, with time we will see a reduction of those trips, so that cover in terms of follow-up. And we must also remember, when the president is visiting other countries, it's also an opportunity to get exposure in many of these countries. Like when we got the European Union as a country, because the president represents the country in essence, you know, that is an opportunity for many people across the world to know that a country called Kenya actually exists. We have things that we can be able to sell. And therefore, I believe that we should take you know, the headline in itself, you know, elicits some level of debate. But I think it is important to also interrogate, of these individual trips, what does Kenya stand to gain as a country? And I think that is the discussions that we should be having, and doing an audit and saying, out of the 48 foreign trips and the 350 million that we have spent... 360. Right. You know, what is the return on investment? What has that brought to the country? Because, you know, sometimes as a businessman, you must ask yourself, I have spent 350 million. I have spent 360 million. What has the country gotten as a return as when I have spent this kind of money? Now, when you realize that your ROI is very good, because you know, when you say 360, it looks very big, over 48 trips, but the question is this: when, say, you're able to get funding to repay, say, your Eurobond, and you know, you're supposed to pay in billions of Kenya shillings, and you get that money back, do we have a return on investment of the trips that the president has been making?
But again, Eric, somebody would argue that, you know, these are G2G kind of arrangements, so it might take a bit of some time. The formulation, we have got policy framework that has to be put in place. For example, president goes to India, there has to be, you know, it has to take some time before we start seeing the real fruits and benefits of such foreign trips.
The truth is, all good things take time. But if you've traveled with a delegation, say, with the head of state to different countries, the negotiations are usually done prior. What you see mostly you will, the differing or the tethering issues will be very few, but a lot of discussion has gone between the ambassadors and the commercial attaches of different countries and institutions to try and bring an agreement that can be settled into. So as pertains time, it is true, all good things take time, but we must also be cognizant that those things will not take time if we do not start in the first place.
Okay. You see, one thing, just to interject a bit from what you're discussing, I mean, the president and the presidency and the government should be accountable for example, these trips. For instance, I think President William Ruto went to Silicon Valley, was it early this year, without the minister in charge of ICT. I think the minister in charge of ICT was distributing some football uniform somewhere in Migori, somewhere at that particular time when he was at Silicon Valley. Whatever memorandums were signed in the previous regime, we could see the president will go to China and meet the president of China to sign the China Roads and Bridge and say, okay, I came up and we signed a deal over SGR, for example. You get me right? And then the president went to China and he has gone to places. He's not accountable on what did I go to do and what MOU did we sign, for example. Even if we check those things, you know, those things need to come, yes, because there's a policy framework that needs to be done. But they're supposed to be that we've gone to place A, signed a memorandum, and I'm telling you, for places like Djibouti and Seychelles, for example, there's nothing in paper that we can see that there was a meeting. The minister, the line CS was also involved, and a memorandum was signed, and now we are at implementation stage. But this is the trips are just blah, and we don't know what you're going to do there. Even the delegation that is carried, for example, if you go to Silicon Valley, the line ministry should be able to be involved. Right. So that when you sign anything at Silicon Valley with these people, we know, even the young people back in Kenya knows that there is an MOU that has been signed. So they start preparing mentally.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Granted that there have been very beneficial trips, and they have not only been in vain. For example, what Oscar is talking about, the Silicon Valley, I know there has been a lot of traction in terms of towards Konza City. Those things, what my concern is that each of these trips must be in measured terms and come back and audit and say, I went to this, these are the tangible results. That's what Muturi was calling return. If I have invested this, if I've gone to this country. But they seem like very sporadic trips. And the perception is what really has to be managed. You go there, you do not communicate what you brought back. It's all, we have signed this. And it looks like at most a photo op. And I think it's important for the president now to sit back, because as nationals, as citizens, have raised this concern about his constant trips, very frequent trips. I think it's for him to listen and say, what are Kenyans asking? And what is it that I'm bringing home? It's a conversation that he has to begin to listen to, that we have raised.
I think I agree with Bosire. In terms of communication, you know, if you were to grade, say, government in terms of how it communicates to its citizenry, I think out of grading system, you know, we had a hitch of KCP, now we must choose the grading systems very well. But I think in terms of an A to E grading system, I think they have scored a partly C- in terms of how government communicates to its citizenry on exactly what they are doing and what they have been doing. So that what we tend to get mostly as citizens is the propaganda that has been generated from very many quarters, and that is what forms the bulk of what the government communicates to its people. So by the time the truth is getting to the citizens,
the damage is now way
the damage
out there.
is already done, and now Kenyans are thinking, I think these guys are just course correcting, they're just trying to do damage control. There is room for improvement, because the truth is a lot has been achieved. That's the reality. But you know, someone always say, if you're winking to a lady in the dark, it is of no consequence. And I think that's partly what government has been trying to do very hard, winking at Kenyans in the dark. There is room for improvement in that, so that, because you see, when you read the headline, that we've spent 360 million, you know, Kenyans don't look at the benefit. Kenyans see that you have actually spent our money, 360 million, to travel. But the reality is, that money has been deployed to a good use. But to an ordinary Kenyan, the question is, what is that good use? There is no one to communicate what that good use is.
All right. I think our colleague Hussein Mohammed is listening to this, and the entire team at the government office. Okay, I'll combine the two papers here, the Daily Nation and the People Daily, more or less the same. Raila under siege. It says that Azimio leader Raila Odinga is a man under pressure. Some of his coalition allies have refused to support his decision to endorse the Boomers Talks report over its failure to include ways of cutting taxes to bring down the cost of living. And now Mr. Odinga says that the document is quote-unquote a good beginning, but his allies think otherwise. Let me put here, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, who is also the Azimio Council chairman, is said to be opposed to the report. Number two, now Kenya leader Martha Karua says that the Boomers Talks report should be rejected in toto. And the DAPK leader, that is Eugene Wamalwa, who was also a member of the talks team, has opposed the report. So that is that. And again, on the front page of the People Daily, Raila dilemma on talks report, again, more or less the same thing. Political analysts say that adopting National Dialogue Committee's report, on which his key ally, Kalonzo Musyoka, served as a co-chair, has not addressed high cost of living issue, would appear like betrayal of his supporters. This is where we would say that Raila Odinga is under between a rock and a hard place. Two papers, almost same headlines. Raila Odinga under siege, Raila dilemma on talks report. Ken?
I think from the very onset, the word dialogue, what's the meaning of the word dialogue? It's a discussion. It's not a question of saying we either have this, is give and take. And one of the things that Raila is a pragmatic leader. He sees he has better interests of the country. He wants to have a discussion. That's what he was looking for. And that discussion forms the basis of how. It's a continuous discussion. It's not a one thing that you just come and say, we've done it and it's over. Like he says, it's the basis for us to continue having a discussion. And saying that, it's also pretentious, hypocritical for anybody to imagine that all the problems of Kenya began 1 year ago. It's a continuum. Some of the people are rejecting, even including the former president, the retired president. They are never former, they just retired. He was part of the continuum. He was part of it. What are some of the prescriptive solutions he has put? It's always good to say, I differ with this, but this is the way I see we need to go. Don't just say reject because reject is politically convenient for you. Which support are you talking about? Do they themselves live the language of because each time they are in that space, it's about them. They're talking about the cost of living. Nobody is actually one of those people. They're not talking about if we get those positions today, will they reject them?
Yes.
I want to hear anybody saying, I have rejected. Kalonzo was he's the one leading those talks. And what is this prescriptive thing about cost of living? It's not just a one-cut thing and say this. It's a whole continuum. Production is down in this country. We produce nothing. What do we export? Nothing. We just import. So those are some of the dynamics we have to look at. Look at the stock exchange. What has happened to it? It tells you that the wealth of this country is in a few hands who can actually manipulate it. Have we spread that wealth?
Yes.
Are we sparring productivity? Are we moving together as something, this is what we need to do? But you can't just say, I reject. You reject with what? A reasonable human being in a discourse would say, this is my alternative. Don't just say, I reject for the sake of it. It's so easy for this country, for leaders to speak conveniently without being pragmatic. And for this, I have a lot of respect for Raila. He's being pragmatic. Let's talk, we've started talking. It's not a one-day thing. Let's continue having a discussion. The next item is this.
Okay. I beg to differ with Bosiri on this particular document, but because the thing is that the dialogue talks left the backbone, the character of the struggle that we ended up with this dialogue, national dialogue at the Bomas of Kenya, was because of the crisis, the frustration that people went through that made Kenyans to go on the streets, to go and agitate for change and bring the cost of living down. They needed immediate responses to this. So what has been left out is the core thing that took us there. You can't. Then what is included even in the discussion that we are starting? Things like Senate Oversight Fund. Senators are paid to do government oversight. And then you want to create a Senate Oversight Fund. CDF has to be put into the Constitution. We want to create a local authority service delivery funds for MCAs. What is happening is the elite sitting together and agreeing, because we have a very parasitic elite. A parasitic elite that will never understand what is really ailing the Kenyan people. All they want is getting situations, taking advantage of situations of such to benefit from it. And now, whatever we got at Bomas of Kenya, for me, I completely reject it because, first of all, it was not national dialogue. I have always said it was an elite type of dialogue, and the elite agreed to share whatever they can benefit from it. Because why do you have a Senate?
Assume you're part and parcel of that. The delegates who probably presented their memoranda.
Yes.
What would you have given them as a part of your memorandum to be captured in that report?
Mostly it is to deal with direct response to overbearing cost of living.
Yes.
How do you do it? There need to be administrative and policy things that we need to be intentional about. There are people who are not able to afford 3 meals a day in this country at the moment. We need things like very intentional, like direct cash transfers. We need to deal with, for example, we have now Christmas and we have January. People are going to take their kids to school. Very many kids will not go back to school because of what is the cost of living that is affecting them directly.
Going back to school is not an emergency.
It's not an emergency, yes, but what I'm saying is that we need clear policies that can address what people are going through at the moment directly.
So you reject that Bomas Talks report?
For me, I think it was aborted. Because it didn't really address the character of the struggle.
Okay.
Yes.
Eric.
Victor, when you come to Nairobi for the first time, say you're coming from the village quarters, most Kenyans' first point of call is a country bus, Masaku. Now, when you alight at country bus, most likely you're going to head your way towards the bus station to pick a vehicle towards your final destination. Now, on your way, there are entrepreneurs who've perfected a certain game where you put cartons somewhere, and usually they have like 3 cups. Now, how the game is played is this. Of the 3 cups, they put a coin in under one of the cups. So they ask you to choose which cup has the coin in it. Now, if you choose the correct cup, you win, say, 1,000 shillings. But if you lose, they take your 100 shillings. Now, why am I giving that analogy? Because the Kenyan politician has perfected that game of those cups. The Kenyan population are akin to the first guys that get into Nairobi for the first time. The politicians are the players. So they always ask Kenyans to check which cup has a coin underneath. And always, it is the Kenyan who chooses the wrong cup for some weird reason, and it is always the Kenyan that is losing. But the politician, come whatever may, for those who do gambling, they say the house never loses. So the Kenyan politician will always win against the Kenyans themselves. And why is that important? That is important because we really need to interrogate our politicians and not just say the opposition, even our government. Sometimes we need to question these things that they do on our behalf, do they really do them on our behalf? For this simple reason, Kalonzo was the head of delegation of the bipartisan talks.
The other side of Azimio.
The other side of Azimio. So it means he had the blessings and powers of the full Azimio team. Otherwise, they wouldn't have chosen him as the leader of delegation. And therefore, for those people that have been mentioned in the Daily Nation, to come out of the woodworks and say that we do not support the stance that was taken is an act of hypocrisy. It is what I am saying, that the politician must always win and the Kenyan must always find a reason to lose the game. And therefore, it is important to say that we need to call out politicians when we think they are playing a game of cards or a game of coins and cups with our lives. We need to have the potential to call them out. We need to tell them that on this path, you're sidetracking us, you're not taking us towards the right direction, and we need to call them for what they are. Just as we sit here and critique government and say, you know, as government, we do not think we are headed in the right direction. At the same time, we must also call leaders from the opposition side, because at the end of the day, I believe all of us are seeking the collective good of our country and not the good of specific individuals.
Okay. So I want to believe that Azimio had their intelligence during that talk. So why the silence, what you're trying to talk about, coming out right now to say that they're rejecting the entire talks is something to be questioned. Yes, Ken?
I think, Victor, this conversation about elite, why do we think the elite are animals, UFOs that have landed on our country? These are us. We've elected them and given them that mandate. And the 2010 Constitution gave us very clear powers that we can exercise as citizens. And yet, we seem to be blaming at the leaders. We talk about leaders. What do we stand for when we go for an election? That's where the question goes. We need to introspect at individual level, at national level, and stop thinking that leaders come from heaven or wherever they come from wherever. The thing is, it is about us. Why do I elect X? Why do I cede my power to them to represent me in whatever they do? I think the whole spectrum, 2010 Constitution begins to, the public needs to take its own space.
Yes.
And unless we do this, we'll continue crying. These leaders, like when Kalonzo says, I reject, my people will not accept. These people, he's speaking on his people as Kalonzo, who thinks and assumes that he has been given the mandate. And yet the same people will complain our cost of living is high.
Yeah.
So look at that contradiction that we have. We are a country of contradictions, a country of convenience, a country that does anything that is not based on what we call strategic national values.
Okay, so let's take a break. When you come back, I believe your cups are now almost half empty, or they are all empty. We need to fill them. I also need to fill mine. So let's take a break. We'll be right back, delving into Kenya 60, Kenya at 60. Moving forward, what should you expect? Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Did Ricardo call you? Why did he call and look for you?
I don't know what you're talking about. I heard you. You ever once thought that Magdalena spends all day in that room of hers? And that she's the only one among us who seems to be going crazy?
Your beloved brother-in-law and all of Puebla will find out who you really are.
What are you doing? No, what were you looking for? Magdalena put that there so that you would start to doubt me.
She is a very dangerous woman.
Samahani, pole ni tumeende tulikuwa tumesaliana hapa.
Ni nini mbaya na hawa watu? Na huyu wendwa ndizi vitu yote ametoa wapi?
Sasa sikiza. Ujumbe unasema hivi.
And the food run. Nani ametuandika kazi?
Mama Kayai nafuta we kazi. And you are one of the most loyal employees of Mama Kayai. Twende.
Mama Kayai yako kwa ofisi mpeleke.
Ngoja, Chema Sunde. Hujawahi niona nikiwa smart basi. Hii ni kidogo. Ngojea sherehe kesho.
Na tena tunaimba ile wimbo.
Tusangirie Kenya, Kenya
Sawa, ngoja. Fanya hivi.
Beberu hakutaka kutia sukuko mbele. Hakutaka kufanya chochote. Na kwa hivyo watu wakawa hawana nafasi.
Ijapokuwa watu wakisema kufundisha watoto watapata kazi wapi?
Our villages and towns are powered by electricity.
How has Kenya fared in the realization of her independence clarion call of eliminating ignorance, poverty and diseases? Kenya at 60, a special KBC coverage beginning Monday, the 4th of December to Jamhuri Day. Technology has become a crucial part of our society. Without technological advancements, so much of our everyday lives would be drastically different. As technology develops, it strives to fulfill the changing needs of society. This means that technology exists to help us achieve the things that we wouldn't be able to achieve without it. Take on Tech looks at the advantages and downside of technological innovation in a world that is becoming increasingly dependent on new digital technologies. Every Monday at 10:30 p.m.
All right, welcome back, Ken Bosire, Oscar Mondi, and Eric Wandude. Did I get it right?
Muturi Wanduthi.
Muturi Wanduthi. But I want to get that real accent.
Muturi Wanduthi.
That's what I wanted.
That's the authentic Muturi Wanduthi.
Yeah, Muturi Wanduthi. That's what I wanted. Okay, gentlemen, let's cross over to and see what we have in our. I mean, let's also see what's happening in the local. Across our borders and see what's happening here on the front page of the BBC. What's happening here? Javier Milei, new president tells Argentina shock treatment looms. This is a new president. It's not about the new president of Argentina here. Argentina's new far-right president has vowed to deliver economic quote-unquote shock treatment in his first speech after formally taking office. Javier Milei want Argentines that, quote-unquote, there is no money and recommitted to a program of harsh austerity measures. This gentleman is also... We've just talked about austerity measures here, yes. And, you know, Argentina is also facing the same. Harsh, and this one is called, there is no money, quote-unquote, there is no money and recommitted to programs of harsh austerity measures. Probably, according to Javier, this is the right way to go. I mean, Ken?
I think one of the things, I think that is the realistic talk we need to have, and stop pretending that we have money in this country to deal with. What we have, the little money that we have, is just to cut it down. But looking back, there's something that, a conversation that we tend not to have. The world is suffering a shock, or that kind of shock, knock-on effect after the COVID thing. And a lot of that COVID, because we were in lockdown for 2 years, we ate from our reserves, we borrowed, but how much, only those economies that were strong enough, those economies that used whatever they had during COVID, are able to get along. But those countries like us who are reckless, got money, borrowed money and spent it the way we wanted, not for intended purposes, will suffer greater shocks.
Yes.
But there is, globally, there is a post-COVID economic meltdown.
But it's quite interesting that everybody's talking about a new president coming in office and the only thing they talk about is economy. And see what he said, the quote unquote, the bottom line is there is no alternative to austerity and there is no alternative to shock treatment, according to him. And he continues to say that we know that in the short term, the situation will worsen, but then we will see the fruits of our efforts. Perhaps this is just quite the same as what we're discussing here back at home. Oscar?
Yeah, it is the same, but you see, when you get to power, you might try to talk like that.
Yes.
But
so this is what is close to people's hearts.
This is what, if you go, you should read that speech and go and read probably President Ruto's inaugural speech. Could be just the same speech. Get me right?
Yes.
When he was being inaugurated as a president, maybe he was discussing the same thing. And they're like, we have to deal with this one and we have to deal with it. There's that opportunist. He feels that things can change at that particular time. But when you get to work, then you find that mostly we recycle our elite. For example, the elite that we have in Kenya. The same people, same mindset, and they don't want to look at another person's point of view.
Yes.
You know, when you're closed, you're in a closed system, where you don't want to listen to another person's point of view, you cannot do crisis management. And I told you, some of these things are not sudden. Some of these things are things that are smoldering.
Perhaps what we can just relate to what Ken has said, because of the economic meltdown that we had during coronavirus.
Yes.
We've not recovered from that yet.
We've not recovered.
We've not recovered completely. Muture, what do they? Oscar is saying that probably somebody copy-pasted a speech.
Same speech.
You know, it's always good to evaluate international politics, especially with a view of what has happened previously. I like the new president, Milei of Argentina, and his pomp and flair when he comes into office. In fact, one of his, you know, the presidential slogan that you're given, what is it called? The emblem, like the one that was engraved a wheelbarrow for the Kenyan president. For his, he has engraved his 5 dogs. And one of his closest confidants is his sister. I think she's called Karina. She's poised to be one of the most influential persons in that country. But there are certain similarities between, and this is where I think the world is going. I think generally world over, people are saying they need change, and therefore they are electing all sorts of characters that appear to go against the grain.
Yes.
We had US Donald Trump, who was a huge denier of, say, climate change. We went all the way to Brazil, got a person who was close to Trump, that was Bolsonaro, who was again ousted by Lula, who was replaced by Lula da Silva. He only went for 1 term and then had to disappear from his country. Then now we have the man himself, Milei, who is now the president of Argentina. He's also a Trump supporter, and he also does not believe that climate change exists. But one of the interesting things I see is that there's a difference between pronouncements and getting down to work. You remember in Ukraine, they elected, after so many years of misrule, they elected a comedian, Zelensky, and Zelensky went ahead and plunged Ukraine into an ending war, you know, with the tussle between him and Russia.
Yes.
I always think that when you take the mantle of leadership, the political pronouncements are okay. But I think you must not take that as a working formula when you get into power. And you realize when you come back to our country, the political pronouncements that the deputy president, who is now the president, was making are now coming back to haunt him, because Kenyans now compare, this is what you said, this is what you are doing. But the reality is, as a president or as a country, you do not live in a vacuum. If your country had borrowed, say Argentina, which is actually struggling right now, had borrowed, it does not matter the rhetoric that you give to the people. The truth is, if there was debt, you must pay.
That's the same thing we're talking about here, back home. Does this photo remind you of some famous footballer?
It's Diego.
Yes.
He was also an Argentine, by the way.
Yes.
Coming back to the front page of the France 24, again, Israel bombs South Gaza after Hamas hostage threat still happening across our borders. It's quite crazy there, gentlemen. It's not so good over there. Israel bombed southern Gaza's main city on Monday after Hamas warned no Israeli hostages would leave the territory alive unless its demands for prisoner release were met. This is the latest from that particular region, and yeah, you can take a look at either the BBC or the France 24. But again, according to the European Union Foreign Minister on Monday, said that they're considering possible next steps in response to the Middle East crisis, including a crackdown on Hamas finances and travel bans for Israel's settlers responsible for violence in the West Bank. So this is generally what is happening across there. Gentlemen, there is this quote here, and I want us to go back. This was a quote by the founding president, Jomo Kenyatta. God said, this is our land in which we flourish as people. We want our cattle to get fat on our land so that our children grow up in prosperity. And we do not want the fat removed to feed others. Ken Busire, what do you really think ran through the mind of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta when he said this?
I think he probably at that particular time, just after independence, he was feeding on what we call the optimism.
Yes.
That was there after long, protracted struggle. And at that time, there were three main challenges for us as Kenyans. That when he came in, they were framed into three things. There was poverty, there was ignorance, and then there was disease. I use this the analogy of a fat cow. That cow could be a Kenyan that he wanted us to prosperity, pointing prosperity. Have we walked that path? Did we set the ground for us to walk that path that would have tied with this quote? I submit that we did not. We found, instead of feeding the cow that was there and nurturing it, we first ate it up, and whatever, when it was finished, we didn't know where to get the seed for the next calf, because we found a cow that was left behind.
What exactly is this cow?
The cow is about prosperity of a country.
Yes.
Growing the wealth of a country. We had the potential, but have we managed it over the 3 years, over the 60 years? I think we have not probably done it. We've made some strides, but fundamentally, what has hobbled country is the poverty that has continued to haunt us. Because we never, if you are poor, you can never manage ignorance, you can never manage what we call disease. So that poverty has been an elusive thing for this country.
Yes.
That wealth that was supposed to create the fat cow. And when it was fattened, to whose compound did it go? Did it belong to all of us? We ended up not milking all of us.
Who fed the cow?
Who fed the cow? We were supposed to feed it all and milk from all of us get the milk. But we ended up feeding the cow, and a few people started milking. And that means the rest just became bystanders.
Yes.
That has been one of the problems, the challenges of the country.
All of us in our own rights back in the villages, we've gone to the grazing field, and there is that one fat cow, Oscar, that Mzee will tell you, Duasiere, I mean, where is that black one?
The black one.
You know, we need to talk about what Mzee said. And when you talk about that fat cow, the same way Ken is putting it, probably somebody was going to take care of this fat cow, but whose compound did that fat cow go to? And what was the mind of Mzee when he was speaking this? Years later, 60 years down the line, is this cow still fat or starting to lose some weight?
I think, again, when I was discussing with you about the bombers thing, there is a misrepresentation of the character of the struggle. What Mzee is talking about here has also is the optimism, the way Bosire is talking about at that particular moment. And these were the same words that were echoed in our national anthem, where I said, "Justice be our shield and defender, may we dwell in unity, peace and liberty." And then he says, plenty be found within our borders. I think these are the plenty that we wanted to be found within our borders. You get me right? But which ideology did we take at the time of independence? Boyer and others who were in a small debacle one day at Taifa Hall in the University of Nairobi when Barack Obama Sr. says, what Boyer is talking about, the African socialism does not exist. This is capitalism being given a different name. Get me right? Because they were trying to come up with ideas that can make our production grow. And what was the plan? It was documented in very many government documents, session paper number 10 of 1965 and all this, on how economic growth we will be able to do, we'll be able to get it. But what happens is capitalism, trickle-down effect. That when we produce, and again, session paper number 10 was saying this, that the productive areas of the country, which is mostly Rift Valley and Central Kenya, we will be able to pump in resources there in terms of finances, and the other parts of the country will provide labor. That is where we end up with people providing labor or in tea farms in Kericho and all this, you know. But there was supposed to be a trickle-down effect so that everybody, there's equal and equitable resource distribution. Unfortunately, that trickle-down effect has been elusive for the last 60 years. The production is not, even the poverty we are talking about. Yes. It is because the well thought about trickle-down effect didn't happen. So we ended up with a 1 or 2% who were stinking rich and 99% who were, so the gap between the poor and the rich has been widening, and we see mushrooming of slums and ghettos in the city, and now that trickle-down effect, when it fails, we receive very many people. There's been too much rural-urban migration. Why are we having too much rural-urban migration? Because the trickle-down effect does not get down there.
Okay. Yes. I'm trying to imagine, Eric, if Mzee were to speak in his local dialect, I'm trying to imagine, how would it sound in his local dialect, but then addressing Kenyans. But most importantly, he said, after all this is done, we do not want the fat removed to feed others. The fat, not the cow. We do not want the fat removed to feed others, which means you go there, feed the cow, let it get fat, but do not remove that fat to feed others. What was he trying to achieve or to mean by removing the fat and to feed others? And who were these others way back then? And do these others still exist today?
We need to put this quote into context.
Yes.
And this quote was, I can see it was said in a speech in Nyeri in July 26, 1952. That is 71 years to today.
Yes.
Now in 1952, we were very patriotic. You see, we attained independence in 63. So at 1952, the collective mind of Kenyans was one of prosperity. It was one of liberation. We were all as Kenyans united and seeking towards a certain goal.
Yes.
Okay? But then, I like this quote, but I would want to rephrase this quote in 71 years later. And this is how the quote should now read 71 years later. To paraphrase, this is Moturi Wandu, this quote.
Perhaps Mzee is not listening.
Yes, now he's gone. That God said this is our land. Land in which a few people flourish, their cattle are getting fat on our land, and our children no longer flourish in prosperity. The fat has been removed to feed others. That is the correct quote now, 71 years later. So we started well. You know, there is a song.
What did you just do to the quote of Mzee? What did you just do?
You know, there is a song in Kikuyu that says, you know, you started with the spirit, now you've ended with the body. I don't know how to translate correctly into English, because in mother tongue it sounds very well. Tulianza na roho, tumemalizia na mwili.
Yes.
So this phrase here ni roho. Hii tulianza na roho. Ile yenye nimekusomea tumefika sasa mahali ya mwili. So this is to say that the people we bestowed upon power to lead us into prosperity are the same people that turned around and milked, including what our children had.
Yes.
They took our herds and milked them for their own gain. So what as Kenya, we wanted to benefit, what would have benefited us as a majority was unfortunately taken by those that we gave power. They gave themselves the liberty to take the land that belonged to the colonialists, because remember, as we were speaking, there were people in the forest.
Yes, it was
and in the bush
July 26,
in 1952. There were people in the forest, and what were they fighting for? For freedom and for land. By the time they were getting out of the forest, the freedom was there, in quotes, the land was gone. Who had the land gone to? The same people that we trusted would lead us to the promised land. And therefore, it's good that we remember 60 years, down the line. It's true, we have achieved many things. That's for sure. We cannot deny that as a country, both politically and economically, we've come from far. But the truth is, there are salient and fundamental things that we've swept under the table. We have formed commissions. And our wars also started with sessional paper number 10, if you recall that sessional paper.
I need to take a look at that paper number 10. Oscar also talked about it.
Yes. So that is, as a country, there are a lot of things we've swept under the carpet that we don't want. We pretend they do not exist, but the reality is one time we need to sit down and discuss and say, okay, we are 60 years today. What is it as a country have we achieved? What have we swept under the table? Can we have a candid discussion? Because this country belongs to all of us. You remember during post-election violence, we had Kenyans fleeing to Uganda. Can you imagine Kenyans were fleeing to Uganda as IDPs? Where else for a longest time, Kenya has been known to host a number of refugees into our own country, and we have been very hospitable. So I think 60 years after independence, and putting into consideration what we envisaged from the founding fathers, we need to have a sober discussion, devoid of emotions, and say, Victor, when your father was in power or your grandfather, this is what they did to us. And you say, Muturi, also, when your grandfather was given an opportunity to become a chief, this is what he did in my area. And therefore we say now, as the grandchildren who are here now, what retribution do we make? What amends can we make as a country to make sure that, Victor, you feel you're part of this country, and to make sure that I, Muturi, Bosire, and Oscar, we feel that we belong to this country, and the discourse that we have is actually meant to build the country moving forward.
Very well. And when we look at this quote, Ken, I'm putting this one to bring us to context on what you're celebrating tomorrow. If Mzee was to wake up tomorrow and say, because this one he said right at the front of Mount Kenya, this is Nyeri, and the heart, probably somebody say heart of Kenya. Then now, 60 or 71 years later, plus or minus, is this cow still fat?
I don't think, first of all, let's begin like this. The cow was never available to all of us. There was no indication that we will grow the cow. That one cow that was supposed to fatten and take the fat, a country that was supposed to grow together was that we would have more progeny from that cow, so that all of us take part in having that cow. This cow remained for a few people. They've continued milking, and I tend to think at that point is that cow was never a Kenyan cow. It was a cow for a few people who had seen it. Most of us thought we would see it. We were promised a cow. That cow just disappeared. We saw the milk.
In a normal situation, a cow has horns, hooves, tails, all that. But in Mzee's mind, what did this cow had?
It is the fat, the milk.
The milk?
Yeah, which was the most important thing that most African societies respond to. Only when it's slaughtered is when we have the hooves and the horns and everything. But this was supposed to remain alive. And the person who continued milking it actually never shared the milk to all Kenyans. They ended up, I milk, they drink it fast. You know the case of animal farm? Others are the ones who think, so they take the milk, the rest can just cheer us on. And that is cow. If that cow exists as Kenya today, it died. Or if it is there, it's hobbling and emaciated and...
So what you're trying to say that we've not made any progress?
We've remained...
Now that the cow died.
The cow may have died. We are getting the skin and the hooves down.
Oscar, Mzee must be a very sad man. The cow had died.
When Jomo Kenyatta dies and Moi takes over power, And what does Moi says? I will fuata nyayo Mzee.
Yes.
Like, I will do whatever Mzee used to do. I remember again of another statement when Ngeny, I think, who was the former director of Telcom Kenya. Was it Telcom?
Kenya Post and Telecommunications.
Kenya Post and Telecommunications. Yes. They were planning to privatize, to sell, to whatever again is happening now, to sell Telcom. And Moi was like, don't sell the cow, right? Let the cow get a young one, then sell the young one, and we continue milking the cow. Because he knew that there was the proceeds of corruption from telecom, which was now this cow. But Ngeny and people who were working there were planning to sell it. But Moi is telling them, no, don't sell it. Let us just get a young one. After it's getting a young one, then we continue milking the cow. From what Bosire is saying, that the cow is not there. You get me right? 60 years. And again, you know, the history of Kenya is not really 60 years. The history of Kenya is 120 years. 120 years is because we had the first colonial government that lasted for around 60 years. And now if you do a comparative, a good analysis about the state Kenya, you must put into context what did the first government that was in 60 years, because it started Kenya being declared a protectorate at the beginning of the 20th century, that is around 1900, and then 1902 we are doing the Kenya-Uganda Railway, right? Then that government is in place until 1963. So those are 60 years. From 63 to 2023, we are now having another 60 years. Right. So we have to put into context what was happening and what have we remained with. We've remained with the colonial legacy. Even the constitution that we got, the constitution that we had in 2010 is not new. This is the independence constitution. We had the Senate, we had the Supreme Court in the independence constitution, and the thinking then was that how do we develop mashinani?
Yes.
You get me right? But when the new government took over, the Kenyan government took over in 63, first of all, the first thing they did is to do away with the constitutional, with that constitution, because they wanted to hold things from the center. They wanted to milk the cow in total from the center. And there was agitation. 1982, multi-party, we started agitating for multi-party democracy, and we get multi-party democracy in 1992. You get me right?
Yes.
That administration is to open the democratic space so that everybody can get a share.
Okay. Let me put it this way. What if Mzee was talking about the freedom that they fought for? He was speaking this in Nyeri. We do not want the fat removed to feed others. The freedom, the gains, the fights, the nights and the tears, that everything that even our forefathers fought for, the Dedan Kimathis of this world fought for, and then we take all the freedom and take it somewhere else, go back to where we were. I'm just trying to imagine if this was in the mind of Mzee.
Sorry again, very quickly, the same Mzee, there's also a saying that there was a day he was driving in wherever, Nyandarua or wherever, and the driver asked him, Mzee, shamba yako ni gani? And then he went to sleep and told him that, okay, pahali nitakuwa nimeamka, hiyo ndio itakuwa mwisho ya shamba yangu. You see, he did not walk the talk from the start. You get me right?
Okay.
If you compare again what Mzee was talking about here, what Nyerere did in Tanzania, and now the picking up Tanzania. Tanzania is getting better now, even economically at the moment, than Kenya. And now, whatever, if we compare, for example, when we were privatizing, when telecom was being sold, you know, now we are again discussing on how to sell KICC. We are discussing on how to sell some parastatals. You get me right? So we are again back there. We always move 2-3 steps ahead and 2 steps backward.
Who said that?
This was Rokajulu, who wrote a document about 2 steps
Someone's telling me when you talk about Mzee saying that don't sell the cow, let it remain, give birth to a young one, then sell the young one. If Mzee was alive, how would Mzee put it? Imagine you're Mzee. Mzee really...
Avana uza ngombe. Wacha ngombe za uza mtoto.
Upate ingine. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us.
Over the years, we have been putting you on the front seat to witnessing our country's history, covering Kenya's most defining moments. As we commemorate 60 years of independence, we give you yet another chance to be part of Kenya's history. This year's Jamhuri Day celebrations will be presided over by His Excellency President Dr. William Ruto at Uhuru Gardens. Watch the live coverage of the celebrations on Tuesday, 12th December 2023 on KBC Channel 1.
Auntie akona ka forehand. Akona the mark of quality.
Nataka kumaliza mambo hiyo wedding.
Kwanza kiongea kitu kia Beatrix sana. Rosi Paul. Umenimaliza kama chai kwa kikombe. Mezi zote zimebaki December, September, October.
Wanaona, I know my rights wala. Ni kama tu nikuje nikwambie uko na kichwa kubwa. Sasa makosa si
au sio? Ndio manake. Okay.
Every Monday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on KBC Channel 1.
Come back. Karibu sana. We're still having our discussion here, celebrating 60 years of our independence. That is tomorrow. We are still going back down memory lane, and we are based on this quote which Mzee said way back in 1952. 1952. This long time ago. And you can all agree that this Mzee was full of wisdom. Full of wisdom. Muturi, yes. Go ahead.
You know, there is a popular saying, you know, one time Rigiji made a statement and he said sometimes he thinks in mother tongue, then he speaks in English. And I think sometimes I'm like that. Mm-hmm. There is a Kikuyu saying that says that the ugali comes from the flour. Uh-huh. It means that what you see as a consequence is a result of the you know, the production material is what begets the final product. And when I was reading this quote, I remembered that, you know, sometimes there is no difference between the father and the son. Because this statement was made by the founding father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, about cow. But the son, when he was president, illustrated to us and said clearly in the open that there are some who are eating meat. I believe now it is meat from this cow. And there are others who are swallowing saliva. And I would believe that 60 years into independence, a majority of Kenyans have no capacity even to swallow that saliva. Because, you know, sometimes you have the liberty of swallowing saliva if at least you had put something in your mouth. But a majority of Kenyans are living from hand to mouth.
Yes.
And therefore the cow, this visionary cow that Kenya was supposed to share, unfortunately, that cow was taken to someone's home, whoever that was. But the rest of the Kenyans had an obligation by law to feed the cow. So we have been feeding the cow all along, and what has been happening is that sometimes when the custodian of the cow, because he's a custodian, yes. He's not the owner, he's keeping it you know, under force, what do we call it, those who do law. So he's keeping the cow on our behalf, even though we have not given that person permission. But once in a while, when the person feels Kenyans are emaciated, he will throw a bit of milk for us to go and share. And then for those who get bigger portions of the milk, we become sycophants. For those that get little, we defend the system a bit. And for those that always admire that one day they would get a drop of milk, they join the bulk, say, of opposition. But I think the ideal would be for that person or for Kenyans to go back for their cow, to agree in one language that this cow belongs to us. There is a system that we need to be feeding this cow just like we've been doing, because the truth is Kenyans feed the cow religiously.
So when Kenyans go back, where do we go back?
To
look for what exactly?
You see, what ails us as a country has been documented.
Right.
It is in writing what ails us. There are very many reports in shelves somewhere gathering dust. So it's not like we don't know. So we need to go back and take what was ours. And we agree that we have fed this cow for a long time. Because you remember, your 1.5% and your employer paying 1.5% is part of feeding the cow. So you remove something from your pocket, that is napier grass, to feed this cow. But we must have an understanding. After doing all that, what does this cow give us in return? And is what we are given commensurate to what we have contributed 60 years down the line to this cow? So that if it is not commensurate, then we need to escalate the discussion and find out who is failing us. Is it that the jelly can has a hole at the bottom, that is leaking when we milk, it's leaking? Or is it that we are using a small jerry can, and therefore we are not utilizing the full capacity of the cow in terms of its production? Or is it that we have a dishonest milkman?
The delivery guy, Ken, you must be a very dishonest person. You take quarter of the milk that's supposed to be delivered.
Or none of it.
Or none of it.
Or none of it.
Right.
So granted that we have had this image of a cow, that what we can now call Project Kenya.
Yes.
Started in very shaky ground and with very high hopes. With time, because of our policies and mispolicies and greed and everything else, it has had its ups and downs. But granted that that has happened, we've still kept the optimism that has kept us as Kenyans. And in that period of time, trying to feed the cow and hoping that one day some of it spills to our side. We also made strides. And these are the things that we look at, what keeps us going. We can't write off totally and say that the cow...
Okay, let's assume the cow died.
Even
the same way you put
if it died, we got the hooves and everything. And the other things. Even
so
the
what
cow
now remains for us as a nation?
Even the cow dung itself
is a product. The same way, Eric, you say that it's called the aftermath of the effect.
In that, I see positive things that have happened, even in that what we call the abortion of our aspirations and many things. I see we've made extensive strides in infrastructure. There's one thing that we should be very proud of as a country, the human resource development that we've had. This country is unparalleled in this part of the continent. The kind of people we've developed, even in those very difficult circumstances. The expansion, we have the experts, we have people now today who are rated very highly in the world as being experts. That's why we tap into this. The human resource, we've never failed even when that cow did not feed us. We've trudged on. We've had creations here, hubs that we have created, like the novelty of Safaricom is one of those things that we can, even when the cow is still in somebody's homestead, the dung has continued to come so that we get the vegetables
sneak
out of
and
it.
milk it somewhere.
One of the other things that in that, we have also managed, one thing that even though we said the constitution that we got in 2010 gave us certain rights as citizens, that we can reclaim part of what that cow that is now tethered in somebody's compound. That power that was given to us, that is what we should now, what Muturi is saying. We can use that leverage, say, let's break the fence, let this cow serves all of us. And this constitution that, in its attempt to get back to share the cake nationally through devolution, so that it's no longer the preserve of one person saying, this will go here. The constitution now gives that let's spread the cake evenly, whatever is left of that cake or whatever we are baking out of it. All these things are important as we even talk about that cow. That cow may be macheted or dead, but there are byproducts that have come out of it. And we've continued to enjoy them. And we would be dishonest to deny that that cow just died in Mze's head. It may have remained in somebody's compound, but we have had byproducts coming out of it. and we've enjoyed. And some of it is what takes us. And that's why we are not completely a basket case. We have kept some of these things going. Even the vain hope that there is a cow that exists somewhere in whatever state it is. And that's what keeps. Hope is exactly the fuel that keeps us going, even when things are really down.
It's even the good book. The good book says that we must be hopeful.
You know
right.
what Posira is talking about is very important. But again, when we look back at 60 years of independence in Kenya, then we look at what events has changed Kenya drastically. I will say one thing that has changed Kenya drastically is the repeal of Section 2A, where we get multi-party democracy in 1992, when we have the first multi-party democracy election. That brings in the agitation, the new agitation for a new constitution, which we get now in 2010. The idea behind this constitution is now to reclaim. The people now are trying to reclaim that whatever they can get out of this cow, you know, the cow dung that Bosire is talking about, iende sasa mashinani, you know, it's been a long struggle to get to whatever Mzee was talking about. 2010 now, we agree as a country, after a lot of agitation, death, whatever, and even 207 post-election violence, that brings us into the brink of collapse as a country. But out of it, we get our new constitution 2010, which comes with the devolution and what have you. The only problem that we didn't, the only mistake that we could have done as a nation, we've had a recycled elite, which some of them who are actually feeding on this cow at the national level, at the central government, are going to rush to the counties to manage these resources down there. What have they done, taken down there? They've taken the bad habit of the center, which is corruption again. So again, for the second time, we start agitating again. We are now fighting against corruption. Where? Because we keep on recycling the elite. The same people, if you mention them, the Uhuru Kenyatta's of this world is the same Mzee's son. Even if you talk about who, mention anybody, he'll tell you. And the Speaker of the National Assembly, for example, Moses Wetangula, he's been an MP from being an MP, he's been a CES from being a CES, he's been, like, these same people have always been there, and we keep on recycling them. And when we recycle them, we don't change the narrative. That means that the voice of pro-reform politicians is lost at some level. People who are reform, or maybe if they get into parliament, when they get there, they completely forget about the reform because of the intention to get the milk at the expense of the majority. And we lost the idea behind the trickle-down effect I was talking about.
Do you really think that as a nation, Eric, we've completely identified our identity as a nation? You remember what Nyerere said? When you go to Tanzania, you know, they have got many tribes, even more than us. We are around 42, 43 right now.
They are 250.
Exactly. But in Tanzania, how many tribes do they have in Tanzania? You will not even hear of any. It's called Ujamaa, according to them, as per what Mzee Nyerere said. But have we, in 60 years, gotten our identity and taking it and say, now this is us as a Kenyan? We are going to run with it for the next couple of years or even moving forward. Have we?
I think our identity is work in progress. Remember, one of the things that the white man did when he settled into the country, he quickly identified the ethnicities that were around and profiled Kenyans. You know, we have Kushites, we have Nilotes, we have Bantus. You know, he came up with a system that classified different cadres of Kenyans. Okay, now, using what he was calling divide and rule, the communities were pitted against each other, so that sometimes you felt, you know, these people who had coexisted for a very long time started becoming enemies. And therefore, when we got independence, the expectation was that there would be a concerted effort and a clarion call to ensure that all Kenyans felt as one and that we were all participating in milking the national cow. But once our founding fathers took power, they realized that it was better to build yourself personally for personal gain than to deal with the interests of the country at large. And so they made decisions on our behalf then that advanced certain communities to be better than other communities, and some other communities were always playing catch up. Now, Tanzania took a different trajectory in forging their national identity. And therefore, my opinion is that there is still room for Kenya to forge a national identity based on ideologies. You see, the last time Kenya felt cohesive was in 2002 during Kibaki's, when we were voting in the Rainbow Coalition. You know, that time a majority of Kenyans felt that they belonged to this country called Kenya. But since then, we have had division along many lines, be they political or be they ethnic in nature. But the truth and reality is, I foresee that the generations, our generation and the generation that's coming, there is an opportunity for us to forge a national identity. It's not completely lost. Article 10 of the Constitution idealizes our national values that we should ascribe to as a country. And devolution was also meant to be a cure and also a means to forge our national identity, so that we would focus on progress, not necessarily based on a national, you know, when we used to look up to the president and we would have to sing praises to him so that development would come to our places. And devolution sort of meant to cool down the political temperatures to assist in the process of national formation.
Yes.
We are not yet there, but the truth is we are also not where we were 60 years ago. It's work in progress. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy. But I believe with the onset of the next generation and our generation, we stand a chance to make sure that, you know, Kenya becomes what originally we as Kenyans and our forefathers envisaged it to be, regardless of the fact that our founding fathers found it fit to make sure that disintegration was the norm. But a majority of Kenyan had an ethos that, you know, they wanted Kenya to grow to the next level.
Yes.
And I believe that is still not lost. We can reclaim that.
Okay.
We still have the opportunity to do
it's
so.
Work in progress.
Yes.
Even though it's work in progress, we still have got dialogue and talks at the government of Kenya. So it's work in progress. We can still relate to that. Ken Bosire, look at it this way. From our own experience as a nation, you know, we are talking about the judicial system. I mean, how we've grown as a country. Somebody can take the president to court right now, a private citizen, and the president will sit back and say, okay, let the justice system do its work. And, you know, can we say that to that level, yes, we have grown in terms of our intellectual capacity as a nation, in terms of our productivity, but most importantly, our political system?
Yes, I think yes and no. In terms of the other aspects of us, we've grown.
Yes.
But I think our weakest point has always been our political discourse, which instead of in our politics enhancing the philosophy of inclusivity, has tended to use the same kind of template that was used by the colonialists to keep people apart. And now that you're talking about ethnicity, our communities, there's a lot of wealth. There's nothing wrong with communities and tribes and ethnic communities. But the variant that they extracted from it, the paradigm that was put there by the colonialists that called tribalism, the negative aspect of it, how we exploit it. But I think for us, we've made strides, but those strides are still hobbled by that very troubling question in this country's discourse about, do we speak, do we have values that keep us, do we put everybody in our basket, or do we still use what we call exclusionist policies? That there is also one thing that we must be alive to, that Kenya does not exist in isolation. Some of the ideologies, some of the shifts we took at independence were as a result of the geopolitical systems, the East-West. Now we came to what we called the unipolar world, and after the unipolar world, that is brought out about globalization, and Kenya has to respond to those things. And now we have what we're calling disintegration of the global systems, and people are beginning to look for different, what we call multipolar systems. And Kenya existing in those ones finds itself in a dilemma, and it has to respond to those things. Even as we respond to local challenges, we still have to respond to those things. But I want to say this, Victor, that even as we talked about the cow that the late president spoke about, that cow may have existed in the Kenyan space, but we thought it was ours. But the ropes of that cow were still with the people who originally had stolen the cow from us. They just continued holding the strings, and that's why even when we wanted to control it, we wanted to free it to other people. The other exigencies that allowed that cow to remain in a certain place, because the rope was still being held by other forces beyond us. And the person who we gave the cow as a custodian tended to look more to those things, what the one who was holding the rope was still doing, as opposed to letting the cow be all of us. We have, for example, when you talk about identity, I think we have things to be proud of. I look at our athletes. Who else beats Kenya in terms of athletics? That is an identity that nobody takes away from us. Who takes away from us our peace missions and diplomacy? We've done. We have those things that we are proud of. We can do. But as I said, one of our weakest points is failing to fix our political system that is exclusionist, that only thinks about a particular people, and tends to fail to...
When you say we fail, it's all about us. We are the voters.
Exactly.
We are the voters.
At that point where where the citizenry has been given the power, but you have the power, but you may fail to exercise
then it is us we are failing. It is our honors to change the system. Oscar, I blame you for that because of the weak political system.
We are to blame, but a leadership of the people is like a mirror, it's a reflection of society. We elect leaders who look like us. So the leaders that we have is whom we deserve. But anyway, just to go back to this identity question. The trajectory that we took at independence, because we are looking at 60 years of independence, Kenya, the trajectory we took as opposed to what Nyerere's narrative, what Nyerere is driving in Tanzania, is that we focused on building the economic power. But Nyerere was saying, let us build the social cohesion first. The economic power will just come will come in place when we build the social cohesion first. Then the economy will come in place automatically, and it is working. As through Jomo Kenyatta's leadership at the independence, he decides, let us go for the economic power, then the social cohesion will come. Okay, right? And it aborted. So we didn't build the Kenyanness that we wanted to see. Then now, what Eric is talking about is that when Kibaki takes over power, Kenyans are voted as the highest optimistic citizens in the world because they had so much optimism and goodwill that was given to governance, was given to Mwai Kibaki. But again, it aborts. How does it abort? By the time Kibaki takes over power, our GDP is like -2, right? Everything has run down, right? Then Kibaki takes over power and brings in this dream team and people who really are pro-reforms and the Mudauras of this world, and everybody takes over. Odinga takes the roads, and we start doing the bypasses and all this. Economic growth is sparkling and Kenya is going now. But again, Kibaki forgets that we need to bring the social cohesion. He goes economics, and we move from -0, from -2 to 8% growth during the first term of Kibaki's government. But this is swallowed because after 5 years of working with the goodwill, the goodwill Mwai Kibaki had, he didn't have to deal with corruption because policemen who took bribes on the roads were arrested by citizens. He had that particular goodwill. So he didn't have to dealing with corruption because citizens will go and tell police, look, we voted a new government, no corruption, unachukua hongo, you get arrested by citizens. That is the goodwill he had. But he forgets to do what? To build the national cohesion. And now 207 happens. And we are at brink. So the 8% GDP growth that he managed to build in the first 5 years goes to 0 again. Because of
start from scratch.
We again start from scratch.
Yes.
Now we come up with ideas. We even build an institution called the National Social Cohesion Commission. So we are building for us a whole institution that will help us to have a cohesion as a nation. You get me right? Because we forgot about the social fabric. Because we are rushing to do what? To build the economic growth at the expense of the social fabric of the country. So we needed to build that social fabric first. After building the social fabric, then we come up and say the economy will fall into place. And Kibaki swallows it. Unfortunately, again, what Kibaki does, Kibaki tries to rebuild it. How now? He accepts, let's go to Bomas of Kenya. And what do we go to do at Bomas of Kenya? Let's do the new constitution. And we do a new constitution. And again, Kenya is happy because now we've put in very good laws, a very robust constitution to govern us that will build that cohesion. With even that National Cohesion Commission in it. Yes. We have devolution in the constitution. We've built it again. What do we do again in 2013? We bring in leaders, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, who actually opposed the constitution to implement it. Give me right? To implement the constitution. How do they start? They promise provincial administration, because we repealed the provincial administration, that we'll have governors who will be elected by the people, and we won't have the provincial administration. But they promised these people that, you know what, if you vote in Raila Odinga and his team, you people who are in the provincial administration will lose your jobs. Okay. So for you to retain your jobs, make sure you bring this.
Okay, but let me ask you this question. Yes. Do we have faith? Do we have hope? After tomorrow, 12th of December, we are still starting to count another 60 more years.
Yes.
These are a diamond point as a nation.
Yeah.
In one word, do we have hope?
We don't have hope anymore.
What do you mean we don't have hope?
No, because I told you it was the Kenyans were voted as the highly optimistic citizens in 2003.
I have hope. I have hope as a nation. I have hope.
I'm telling you, go to the airport now. A lot of Kenyans, a lot of young people who are very skilled, as Bosire is saying, are moving out of the country to go and look for jobs. We can't create jobs anymore. We are not doing any more production.
There is hope.
Yeah,
okay, for you there is no hope.
For me, I see a dark future unless radical changes are made.
Okay.
I mean, we've had a national blackout. In a month, we've had 3 blackouts.
Muturi, we are running out of time. Do we have hope for this nation moving forward? What are some of the things that probably, in 20 seconds, that we have achieved? And where you think you and I, all of us here, can do to make a change tomorrow?
Yes, there is hope for our country.
It also says that it's
yes, but
for the young person who is coming now.
Yes, the truth is there is a generation that feels disillusioned, and that's correct, that's true. But I believe moving forward, there is hope for Kenyans. You realize that even the children now we are getting, they don't even understand mother tongue. They just tell you nasikia, lakini siwezi ongea. You know, there is, moving forward, there is some level of optimism. You have seen even in the creative industries, you know, some time back you had to come to VOK, present your song or something for it to be played. Nowadays, people, you go to the streets, you find people shooting videos, young people, right, left, and center. They have YouTube there. You know, in terms of how the world is unfolding, yes, there is hope for Kenya. It's only that sometimes we focus too much on government and we focus too much on politics. We forget that there are other facets of life where Kenyans are forging forward. We just launched a satellite the other day into space. The truth is there is hope, but that hope is calculated. We need to do the hard work, the heavy lifting, to make sure that we have a country that we could bequeath to our children and would actually be proud to run with it and hand over to the next generation a better country than we found it.
Very good.
Yes. I think there is hope. That's less. We are not lost. We just need to pick our strengths and ride on them. And we have many of them. First of all, our human resource, our very enthusiastic and very innovative generation. When I see people going out, for me, it's not a dark point. Yeah. It's what we call investing in a global citizenship that we in the end call what we call brain gain. Look at what the Asian countries have done. Their people went out and now they're bringing the skills back. Today, one of the greatest earners of this country is remittances. That money is coming back here. They don't go and throw it away. When they go out, for me, globalizing our children, our people is good, but at the same time we are being, I think, deliberate in terms of spurring productivity at home. If we can be food secure, this is for me the greatest worry in this country. We begin to look at, fix the basics, forget about those grandiose things. Go the basics, and we can do it with more strategy, more sobriety, and we can go home. For me, tomorrow is bright as bright as we want it to be.
Very good.
So it cannot be all lost.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. You are good people. You are going to heaven. But let me do this before I finish. This is how it looks like. This is on this X on KBC. There's Ken Bosire putting. We are live actually, so you can also log in and on our social media handles, and you can also look at live. That's Ken Bosire making his point. Amemaliza. That's it. And then Olo comes in. Very good. Yours truly. Okay, so this is it. Get real-time updates from this is CS Murkomen. He says that the cleanup of the mess at JKA continues. The KAA board is under strict instructions to carry on with the reform agenda and the management to implement as directed. There was a blackout yesterday again at the JKA. People talked about it, and because of that widespread blackout that the country experienced, KPLC tweeted and said there was a problem with the grid, and now CS Murkomen says the cleanup at the JKA will continue and something has to be done. We are making a formal request to the National Police Service to investigate possible acts of sabotage and cover-up. That is according to CS Murkomen. Again, this is real-time. KBC Channel 1, that is X. Now, these are the gentlemen who are driving this. You can take a look at that, all right? We are serious taxpayers. You know, what do they? You look so happy.
I am. Government is taking my 1.5%.
When you look at Oscar looks like he's ready for war. Like, you know,
he's just saying he doesn't have optimism.
There's no hope. And Ken Bosi looks like the mzee of the bomb. I'm waiting for the boys to say whatever they want to say, then I'll give my final word.
Yes.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Yeah.
This is how we do it. Let's go home and celebrate our patriotism. That's how we do it here on KBC Channel 1. Asante sana for joining us. That is Eye on Politics. My name is Victor Lo. Tomorrow is 60 years. The show continues even tomorrow. We'll be live from the Uhuru Gardens. So stay with us. For now, it's a bye-bye. Good morning.